Hello and welcome to another episode of the Monday Night Wars. It is October 21st, 1996, and we are at the Mankato Civic Center in Mankato, Minnesota. With me is Joseph Rojas. I should mention, I guess I'm Scott Kaufman. But Joseph, how are you doing?
What's going on, dude?
Oh my God. Let's get into it. First of all, we start off with the Macho Man, Randy Savage, Liz tape thing from last week because they're not going to let that go. That's the angle, and I wish it would stop. But we talk about it again, and Larry Zbyszko just tells us that WCW needs a leader. They need a hero. Maybe it's Chris Jericho, because that's our next match.
That's the next line.
That's it. That's the line, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Chris Jericho versus Bobby Eaton, 7 minutes, 5 seconds.
That being said, he's not the Earl Bobby Eaton anymore. Six and Fake Sting are up in the crowd. This is honestly a decently lengthy match and a fun TV wrestling match that sees Jericho win with a missile dropkick. Jericho really hasn't featured a finisher just yet. Meanwhile, Tony Schiavone interviews Jericho right after. Man, is WCW in contract negotiations with both Mean Gene and Mike Tenay? Schiavone mentions that Six and Fake Sting were watching the match. Jericho says it's a coincidence that Six is watching because it's only 6 days away until Halloween Havoc. Nice little tie-in there. He says in Las Vegas he is coming out with a win. Then he stumbles over himself a little bit. But I still think this kid has a bright future. Overall, I enjoyed this, and I gave it a B.
I love it. Yeah, Jericho tells us he's going to get his win against the NWO. He doesn't. But anyways, we got a Rey Mysterio hype video, and we like that Rey Mysterio, don't we, Joseph?
We do. Don't really like the video, though.
Rey Mysterio should, his mask has been stolen. He doesn't have his mask, so he can't go out and be seen. But so he should just also wear like one of the trash bags.
One of the super callow ones?
Yeah, just go, hey, super callow, can I borrow one of your trash bag face masks and wear it? Kind of like Wilson on Home Improvement, just like moving from place to place so you can't see his face. Like, I think that would be pretty good. Dean Malenko versus a fan favorite, Jimmy Graffiti. 6 minutes, 38 seconds. Tell us about the Dean Malenko versus Jimmy Graffiti match.
Jimmy Graffiti is We Have Mikey Whipwreck at Home. He does honestly have a nice touch where he has paint on his fingers like he's just been out tagging all day. So I admired that. Malenko lets Graffiti get way more offense than I expected, and Graffiti goes for a diving seated senton that Malenko counters into his Texas Cloverleaf. This is honestly a pretty fun match. Never thought Graffiti was going to get featured nearly as much as he did, and it gets a B from me.
Yeah, I agree. It went on longer than I thought it was going to. 6 minutes, 38 seconds. It's longer than our next match, which is kind of sad because we got Diamond Dallas Page versus Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman. And I guess I should mention that before the match, they give us a montage of diamond cutters. So that was kind of, we get to see all the diamond cutters. We're hyping up DDP before DDP's match. Certainly he won't win, right, Joseph? Tell me about the DDP versus Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman match that goes 2 minutes and 54 seconds.
Well, the most notable thing is that Pittman has pyro. Fucking what? DDP spits at Teddy Long, and when Pittman checks on him, DDP attacks him from behind. DDP is doing the bang thing, but not quite yet putting his hands together to form a diamond between them. DDP pins Pitbull, who kicks out by launching him into Nick Patrick, and Patrick sells it so well. Now he's saying that he has not only his neck injury, but a lower back injury from where DDP landed on him. Pittman gets the code red on Patrick, but Patrick is talking to Teddy Long while DDP gives up. Pittman gets mad and releases to argue with Nick Patrick before turning around into a diamond cutter, and DDP gets the win. Teddy Long yells at Patrick again, and yes, you're right, it is a quicker match than the previous two, but we get character development from the Teddy Long and Nick Patrick feud, and I love me some DDP. So I'm going to give it a B. We're off to a freaking fire start.
Well, let's talk about this character development, because Teddy's pissed. He yells at Nick Patrick. you blew it. And Nick Patrick says, no, you blew it because you were arguing with me and I didn't see. And I feel like it's making some sense.
I mean, he got a point, but he also wrong.
And then Tony comes out and says, what is going on here? And Tony says, are you just letting the heels win because you're a secret NWO referee? And he says, nah, that's Randy Anderson, which I just love that poor Randy Anderson keeps getting thrown under the bus. What'd you think of this?
It's more of the Nick Patrick stuff. I don't know if I would give this an A, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And I love that, Shivani keeps bringing it up and pointing out very clearly what's going on. Also, he does kind of infer that, like, well, you know what happened to the last announcer who accused me? And the implication is that I sued him so badly he had to leave or got fired or whatever. And so he's kind of, implying that towards Shivani as well. So again, just more fun stuff. We're off to a great start.
After that, we got a flashback kind of thing to Ric Flair getting attacked. That's why Ric Flair hasn't been on TV. We're reminded of that. I looked in this a little bit. Apparently, he does have an actual legit injury. So that's why he's gone. So we need a new Flair. And that's why we got Jeff Jarrett, who is challenging Giant at Halloween Havoc. You're trying to plug and play. You're like, hey, close enough. Jeff Jarrett's our new Ric Flair. And then that leads into the next match, which is Jeff Jarrett versus fan favorite Ron Studd in a 1 minute, 28-second match. Joseph, tell me about this one.
First off, I think you love this, even though you're going to pretend you don't initially. Both men enter the ring. Then Ric Flair comes down to the ring. Flair tells Jeff Jarrett to strut, and Jeff Jarrett obliges. Then Flair has Randy Anderson remove his jacket, and he struts. Then Jarrett struts. Then Flair struts and woos. Then they face off. Zbyszko says, what are they going to do? Compare the size of each other's noses? Great line from Zbyszko. Then Flair shakes Jarrett's hand. And my next note here is Scott loves this. I guarantee it. Finally, the match starts. Jeff Jarrett very quickly applies the figure 4 and gets the win. Right after, Shivani goes to interview Jeff Jarrett, and he says he knows that Jarrett must appreciate the importance of this match against the Giant at Halloween Havoc. Jarrett says we're 6 days away from Jeff Jarrett having to put up or shut up. It's time for WCW to put up some offense. He says that Halloween Havoc, the Harlem Heat, are taking on Hall and Nash, and they're taking him out. Mach is taking Hogan out. And Giant, I have a big bullseye right on your leg. Ric Flair comes over and says that I want the NWO to hear every word that comes out of my mouth tonight. Last week I sat at home. I saw a man stand up and talk good about Ric Flair. That don't happen a lot. At our sport, we don't cry. We don't ask for forgiveness. We just keep on keeping on. Now, you know what? Sometimes we get so good at what we do in life that we take everything for granted. So the NWO, I'm going to tip my hat off to you. You outsmarted the Horsemen. You outflanked us. And worst of all, you played the game dirtier. And thus far, you've won. But starting Sunday night, when I get off that operating table and go to Las Vegas to stand in Jeff Jarrett's corner, everybody in the NWO remember, for every ounce of blood, for every stitch I take, the day I can get back in the ring, along with a man like Jeff Jarrett and the Horsemen, we will kick the NWO's ass. Woo! Fucking great. Just A across the board. The match probably didn't need to happen, but god damn was this good.
I'm going to say about this strut off. I'm going to tell you how I really feel about it, okay? I know Ric Flair. I'm friends with Ric Flair. And if you are trying to tell me that Ric Flair is going to do a strut off with Jeff Jarrett, then I am telling you, I loved it. I loved it. It was fantastic. You could have just had Jeff Jarrett come out to the ring for an interview, and Ric Flair comes in and just says, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And then we do the strut off, and that's the match. And I would have loved every minute of it. Hour 2, Joseph. Fireworks. Lots of them. Arn was not out there to be scared, though. He should be out there every time because it's more fun when he's there to freak out. But we got our next match. We got Lex Luger versus fan favorite Roadblock. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. Tell me about this.
Dear God, during this, Arn gets a picture-in-picture and says that the hourglass has turned for Luger's time in WCW. He's heard him say I quit before, and he will say it to Arn at Halloween Havoc. Lex goes for multiple torture racks before finally landing it, and commentary goes wild as Lex wins. I've been very high on Lex as of late. I did like the promo portion from Arn. I did not like this match. I'm giving this a D.
Roadblock's a big dude. 300 pounds, 400 pounds. I don't know. He's a big guy. And it's supposed to just show you how powerful Lex Luger is. Buy it! Because that's what's up next. We're buying the NWO shirt. But let's talk about the next segment because it's the highlight of the night.
Absolutely.
We're on the phone with Lee Marshall. He is in Phoenix. That's where Nitro's going to be next week. And let me tell you, there's no party like a Nitro party. Tell me about it, Joseph. It sounds like you got things to say.
Absolutely. Like you said, he's in Phoenix and he tells us he's watching a spectacular sunset. It reminds everyone that not only will Nitro be there next Monday, he actually has to run. He can't stick around to talk to them because he went to high school and college in Phoenix. And so he has a few reunion parties to go to. And if I know one thing about Lee Marshall, it's that no one throws a party quite like Lee Marshall.
This is where the party animal Lee Marshall gets his start, right here in Phoenix. He shut Phoenix down.
Absolutely.
They say there's no party like a Nitro party. That's because Lee Marshall is there. Up next, so we got a match between two people we've actually heard of. We got Harlem Heat versus the American Males. We got real tag teams, Joseph. 9 minutes, 33 seconds. Tell me about this.
During this match, Hall and Nash are watching from the crowd. Bagwell tags in Scotty Riggs at the end of this match, then knocks out Booker and double teams Stevie, but Nick Patrick walks Bagwell out of the ring, and the managers of Heat distract Scotty Riggs, and he walks into a Harlem sidekick from Booker, and Stevie picks up the win. This match is fine, but it was pretty obvious. They've kind of been running this same shtick pretty much all night. Hall and Nash this time do not actually interfere with this. They just kind of leave it be. They're just kind of watching. So I gave this a C. It was fine.
We're just going to keep rolling. We're just going to keep rolling. What? Not a Limp Bizkit fan?
I don't understand. Is that like a wrestling reference or?
No.
Oh, okay.
All right, then I guess we'll just keep going since you just friggin' ruined my joke.
You know what we should do, Scott, is we should get our red hats, spin them backwards, and get ready for our next segment.
Because we got Face of Fear in versus fan favorites, the Fanatics.
Is it the Fanatics? I have written down the Fantastics, but you might be right. I genuinely.
Let me see. I might have. No, you're right. It's the Fantastics. That's how much fan favorites they are that I didn't know their name. 5 minutes, 18 seconds.
I don't know how they got 5 minutes out of this. This is a squash match. Obviously, Faces of Fear, we're going to win. This is whatever. I gave this a C.
Tonight has not been great. I mean, maybe they're just keeping their powder dry for the pay-per-view, but it's a lot of effectively squash matches, right? Jimmy Graffiti, Ron Studd, Roadblock, the Fantastics, which I guess the Fantastics, I did look them up. They're an older tag team. Like, they've been around. They've had some good feuds, but like at this point, they're nobodies. Yes. No offense to the Fantastics. I'm sure you're, wonderful. But
no offense to the Fantastics. Huge offense to the Fanatics.
Yeah, with their terrible baseball uniforms. I can usually tell when a night is good for how long we talk about it, and we're at our main event now. Like, that's how fast we've talked about Nitro. Not a great night for Nitro.
These next two things that we're going to talk about, these are the meat of the night. These are the things that are really, really important and continue things forward and continue their momentum. And I would say redeem the night because they are quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is your go-home show for the pay-per-view. So we gotta elevate this. And here we go. We're talking more about the Liz, and because we got to show that scene again.
Yeah,
that's to build up to this fact that Eric apparently has more footage. He also makes mention of the fact that Sting might be here. We haven't seen Sting for a while. He might be here. We've got our main event, which is JL versus Sting. He's here, right, Joseph? Tell me about the match. Minute 40? This is the main event? What's going on?
It is fake Sting. Fake Sting is actually looking less and less like real Sting like every week, which is honestly like it's hilarious to me because they're still calling him Sting. NWO comes down to the ring and fake Sting puts JL in the fake Scorpion Deathlock. Then Real Sting comes down in, what's this? White and black face paint. It is not the iconic face paint that he'll be known for. He'll have this variation and then one more variation before he starts really getting the face paint the way that everybody kind of knows, the Crow Sting face paint. He hits the Scorpion Death Drop immediately on fake Sting. Then he hits 2 elbow drops and then the Scorpion Splash. And then he locks in the Scorpion Deathlock. And the NWO finally comes into the ring. They all take turns trying to get him to join NWO. Kevin Nash quotes his favorite American poet, Jim Morrison, and says that it's time for Sting to break on through to the other side. Hall tells Sting they brought out a bogus imposter because they knew it would get to him, and says nobody knows more about that than Hall and Nash, a very clever dig at WWF. He then says if he joins the NWO, they will treat him the way WCW never did, at which point Sting takes the mic. And he says that right there is your cheap imitation. You get what you pay for, don't you? The real Sting may or may not be in your price range. But the only thing that's for sure about Sting is nothing's for sure. And then Sting walks out, and we are left in confusion. This gets an A. It's building the mystique of what Sting will become, and I'm so excited for that.
Very exciting. Yeah, it really does make up for kind of the lackluster rest of the night. But we're not done yet. Eric goes out to find the Macho Man to figure out what's going on. He's in quite the outfit, Joseph. Black, like head to toe. And Eric says, I got more video for you. Joseph, I'm going to let you take it from here because I think we need a dramatic reading.
Well, I'll explain what happens in that bit first before we kind of get into what I think you're referring to. He has to show him this video and on the set of Three Ninjas. He tells the director, who apparently gets fired by them, that the NWO is taking over the film and Giant is going to direct, which honestly is kind of amusing, even though it's really, really ridiculous. Hogan is trying to tell Liz to play much. If she doesn't, he will ruin her life. The Giant takes her back to Hogan's trailer. Hogan yells at her and tells her to make Macho believe that she loves him. And then we come back to Bischoff, who says this tape proves what kind of man Hogan is, and asks him what's going through his mind. Mach takes a long time and doesn't say anything until finally he utters, well, I got something to say. It just occurred to me how fragile friendships and relationships can be. And you, Eric Bischoff, you and I both know how fragile business can be. Even marriage is fragile. But Hulk Hogan, life is fragile. Then he walks away, and Bischoff thinks that Mach is going to kill Hogan.
Mach promo. I gotta stop you there because this is one of our favorites. This is one of our favorite Macho Mans. The life is fragile. Like when we watched this, we were like, damn, bro.
Yeah. We quoted this for weeks and months after, where everything became fragile. It is so good. Mach's promo gets an A. Everything before it gets an F. I hated everything before it, but I loved Mach's promo.
This is a bold statement when talking about Macho Man. But it might be one of his best promos. Like it's stuck in our minds.
If you said it's his best, that would be bold for sure. I think this is probably top 10. I mean, at least. First off, it's out of character for Mach, right? That's what makes it so interesting, is it's just like he, as a person, has hit rock bottom. The only answer to that is, I'm not going to threaten you anymore. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to go do business. And that might mean that I kill you.
They've finally broken him. He's snapped. He's snapped like a Slim Jim.
Oof.
I know. They got what they wanted. They wanted to break him, but I don't think they're ready for what they got. And I think they're going to come to regret it. In my opinion, the show was mostly not good. The last 2 segments makes me excited for Halloween Havoc. Great way to end a go-home show.
I agree. I 100% agree. Nick Patrick really really shined in the first hour and a half. I mean, he really was putting in work. But beyond that, not a whole lot to really write home about, right? This, like, when people remember these two things we just talked about, they remember this Sting promo because it looked like he was going to join the NWO, and then all of a sudden, we're not sure. And they remember this. I mean, Mach is dressed in pure black. That's all he's in. And it's not like, oh, like the Mach, like, you know, everything. He does have tassels, but it's like part of his normal jacket. Like he's wearing what they call street clothes, which for Mach, street clothes is what we would probably say is a wrestling outfit, but they are street clothes for Mach because he is so larger than life. He's at this point where it's just like point of no return for him. And it's so good. It does also emphasize, Wes has made this point, you've made this point, and I've made this point on the podcast, which is Mach should probably never have joined the NWO because look at the shit they are putting him through. But I'm now hyped for Halloween Havoc.
Yes, Sting, Macho Man, and DDP, in my opinion, always been the anti-NWO faction. That's a triumvirate. Let's move on because we got to talk about Raw because we're contractually obligated.
You know, in my head, I was like, oh, we're done with the podcast. And then you said that, I went, oh.
Nope. We got Raw. It's only 3 matches. You know, let's do what we got to do here. It's still October 21st, 1996, but we move over to the War Memorial Coliseum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They've actually moved venues, but they'll probably be here for 6 months because that seems to be how this works. Exciting news, though, Joseph. Mr. Perfect. He's wrestling tonight. Very exciting. It's totally going to happen. Let's move on because we got Vince and Jerry on the mic tonight. There's no Jim Ross because Jim Ross has been kicked out. He told us last week that he was getting dumped and Vince was coming back because they're being so mean to Jim Ross, you know?
Also, Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly also got dumped.
Yeah, but we don't care about that. That needed to happen. Was not good. I'm still holding out hope. You know, it's funny. I talked about on our Patreon about how we call him, we try to call him like we see him, and when someone does a good thing, we call it out, even if they're a piece of shit, and when they do a bad thing. And I said, if Jerry Lawler ever does anything redeemable, we will bring it up. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, I still can't wait for Jerry and Jim Ross together because my nostalgia tells me it's great, and I know I'm in for the biggest disappointment of my life because I know it's just nostalgia, but I'm still so hyped for it. But if we get there and it's good, I'm going to say it's good. It's not going to be good, but I'm going to say it if it is.
There you go. I mean, you got to stick to your guns, right?
Yes. But of other news, Bret Hart is here tonight and he has something to say. Let's get into our first match, Joseph. Let's talk about Psycho Sid versus Owen Hart. We like these guys, so tell me how it goes.
Bulldog ends up interfering and actually attacks Sid directly in front of Earl Hebner, who doesn't call for a DQ for some reason. Finally, when Sid is going to win the match, Bulldog attacks again, and finally the DQ happens. When this happens, HBK runs in and makes a save. As we know, HBK, he's been feuding with what was Camp Cornette, and now they're whatever they're going to call themselves under Clarence Mason, Camp Mason. I don't know what they're going to call them. They don't have anything.
I don't think they ever call him anything.
No, so they're just there. HBK runs in, makes a save. The two kind of respect each other, but also kind of support each other, right? Because they're going to be facing each other for the title. I personally thought this was good TV fun. We had a decent match. We had a good, the hero makes the save thing while also setting up their match at the next pay-per-view.
It's not bad, but it's Raw and I'm mad at it, so whatever. Afterwards, they show us some photographs of the Undertaker Mankind Buried Alive match from WWF Magazine. Oh, very exciting. And if you want to know more about that, our Patreon's just $2 a month. What are you doing? I thought you were a fan.
At this point, I mean, you might as well subscribe.
Yeah, because we just have such great content. You're getting the pay-per-views. You're getting long versions of these. And we're still debating. We're going to do Thunder, God help us.
And SmackDown.
And we're still debating whether or not that's just going to add on to the Spotify or go on the Patreon.
No, that's no. There's no debate. That's going on the Patreon. That's
Whoa!
exclusive. What we're debating is how we're going to present it, because it's a lot of note taking and recording and stuff. So that's really what we've kind of been talking about. Like, how do we make that where it's not too much of a burden for us, but you guys still get that content? But no, you are going to have to subscribe to Patreon.
Well, you've heard it here first. Joseph probably said this before, and I just don't remember. But you've heard it here first. Subscribe, Patreon. You're going to get the long versions. You're going to get the pay-per-views. And when Thunder and SmackDown happens, you're going to get that. We're thinking we're probably just going to like live stream it. I mean, obviously, we're going to like record it. You're not going to be live with us, but we're going to record it. Just us watching it. And you can probably just listen to my descent into madness live.
Yeah, because I remember as a kid, I remember Thunder being hot, specifically because the very first episode of wrestling I ever watched was Thunder.
Mhm.
Turns out, apparently, people hated Thunder. So I might also be losing my mind.
Could be great, but probably not. Next up, though, we got the Smoking Guns versus the Godwins, and Jim Ross rejoins the commentary table. And we got Jerry and Jim. It's not good yet. So we're not there yet. We're not there to my nostalgia, but I'm trying. I'm trying to be positive. God help me, man. Tell me about this match.
This match isn't good. I'm going to give this one a D. Bart Gunn loses this not great match, but that is important, though, that he loses, because Billy is very clearly frustrated with him over it, which is essential to the character and the turn that Billy will be taking over the next few weeks or months, however long it takes. So that's why it wasn't an F, because I really didn't enjoy this, but that actually had like some purpose. So I went, all right, I'm not going to give it an F. So
there's kind of a storyline here. Billy loves Sunny. He's in love with Sunny, and he thinks the only way to get her back is to win back the titles. That's in his entire focus. So Bart lost the match. Bart is keeping him from getting the title. He's very upset. He's upset with Bart. And you know, they're brothers, but like they're breaking up over a girl. It just happens all too often. It's like a Hallmark movie. It's very sad. I'm very upset.
Well, if it was a Hallmark movie, wouldn't there be like an amazing, like happy ending?
Well, he'd also probably be like a prince or something.
True.
That usually seems to be how it happens, or just filthy rich.
Yeah, and Sonny probably wouldn't kill a guy.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. After that, though, we got our Hall of Fame class of 1996, Joseph. We got Pat Patterson, not Gerald Briscoe, Jimmy Snuka, the Superfly, and Vincent J. McMahon, the father, not the son. Those are the inductees. You got any thoughts about this, Joseph? You got any thoughts about the Hall of Fame class of 1996?
You know what's funny is Vincent K. McMahon always refused to ever induct himself into the Hall of Fame, which I think the wrestlers and talent that were on screen that worked for him. And I do appreciate that. And he also like had it in his, one of his rules were if you got inducted, you could not thank him. You could not talk about him within reason, basically. He didn't want it to be about him. That was the idea. I do think it's funny, though, because he never inducted himself, and now all those allegations and everything have come out. This is not going to be a joke. Don't worry. But all those things have come out, which means he will probably never get inducted. It'll be Chris Benoit. It'll never happen. And which is also probably fair, to be clear. But it was something interesting I was thinking about when you mentioned that his dad got inducted.
I wonder, do they have like a legacy committee or anything like baseball does, where like the legacy committee kind of goes back and inducts guys that should have got inducted but didn't?
They don't really have a structure per se. Like, I'm sure they've got something, right? But it's not like, in baseball, you've got the Writers Association, right? And then off the Writers Association, like you said, you've got the legacy committee. And so you've got certain like things. What they do usually is they go, okay, where is WrestleMania being hosted? Because it's always the night before WrestleMania, or okay, WrestleMania is being hosted, for instance, last year in Philadelphia. Who are some Philadelphia talents that were really meaningful, right? And they'll go off of that first. And then they'll kind of go, okay, well, who else is like deserving, who really should have been maybe in here a lot sooner, blah, blah. And they'll kind of go down the list that way and kind of figure out some of those people. And then every once in a while, it's, did someone pass away recently? So like, honestly, hopefully Sid finally gets inducted. He just unfortunately passed away and Vin Man hated him, and I'm hoping Trips will induct him because he deserves it. That's kind of how they go through things. So you will see sometimes like where someone really notable gets inducted, and then like on the same card, like I hate to say this, but like Coco Beware gets inducted because it's in a city that he's from. I'm not trying to knock Coco Beware, but in the grand scheme of people who probably should be inducted, he's pretty low on the list. But I don't think they have a formal way of doing it the way that like MLB does or NBA or whatever.
Well, maybe they should come up with a more formal thing, and that, the legacy committee can years from now induct Vince and Chris Benoit. Vince has done.
So that brings an interesting point. Do you think those two should be inducted?
Yes.
Really? Because most people disagree.
Again, it's the separating. I guess, yeah. To be fair, what Vince did was kind of in the business too. I think Vince makes it. There's a really strong case. Maybe not so much for Chris Benoit, although I think Chris Benoit was one of the greatest, one of the most gifted technical wrestlers we've ever had.
Correct.
But I do feel like Vince McMahon, he changed wrestling as we know it. I mean, wrestling is what it is today because of Vince McMahon. There's no doubt about it. When there's just one person that's responsible for so much, he made the WWF an international brand. He broke up the territory system. He invented the pay-per-view. He did all of that. Wrestling exists in its current form because of Vince McMahon. And frankly, I think probably for the better. I know a lot of people are, nostalgic for the territorial days and those sorts of things, but like you get to watch the greatest wrestlers of their generation every week, thanks to WWF, which you couldn't do during the territories. Like Ric Flair was in Georgia.
Yeah.
And you had to go to Georgia to see Ric Flair. And Hulk Hogan was up in New England, and you had to go to New England to see Hulk Hogan, right? Now you get to see the greatest guys of their generation every single week on television. And they're making tons of money that they were not making. The territory was rough for everybody. It was a rough business. And wrestlers didn't make a ton of money. Now they make tons of money, and it's all thanks to Vince, whether or not he's a piece of shit or not. It really is.
Yeah. It's an interesting one because I don't necessarily disagree, but I also don't agree. And the reason I don't agree, and this goes for both of the individuals that we're mentioning, is when you talk about Hall of Fame and stuff, what you're talking about is a celebration of. And how do you not celebrate them? Because I don't know if either of them deserve to be celebrated while also acknowledging their contributions. It's a really thin line. It's honestly one of the reasons why, if we talk about real Hall of Fame, so which I'm not saying that to knock WWE Hall of Fame, I really appreciate and love it. But
it's fake ass.
Yeah. But like in MLB, obviously Pete Rose, he died recently, wasn't in the Hall of Fame. He was removed from the Hall of Fame because of, the things he did. People go, oh, well, it's just betting, blah, blah. But like one of the reasons he got like kept out was because he's a piece of shit. And he would regularly be a piece of shit at like every event. Every time that they would try to take a chance and like let him come to an event to be celebrated and be recognized, he would be horrible to like staff and especially women and just people around him. And so now when people are like, oh, he died, so he deserves to finally get put in the Hall of Fame, I'm like, nah, fuck him. I don't really care. So it's a weird balance, right? Like how do you acknowledge the impact they had positively while also not celebrating them, because that would glorify potentially the horribleness. Until someone can present me an answer for that, I can't see a reason to put them in. Based off of, if we were, you mentioned like separating the man and the art and all that stuff. I understand where you're coming from. I can't disagree with that. I just don't know of a way that you could present it properly and make it work.
All right, I'll work up a game plan for you. We'll get this taken care of.
That's fine. See, okay. It's really interesting that we bring this up, right? Because on the Patreon, $2 a month, we mentioned something that I won't go into because seriously, go listen to it, go subscribe, go listen to it. But we did mention something about how like our podcast is a little bit different than other people's because, and you did go into this a few minutes ago. We do weigh things with a more even keel approach instead of just like.
At least we try to.
Yeah. Okay. Except for Jerry Lawler, fuck that guy.
Hey, if he does anything I like, I'm gonna say it. But
yes,
so far, hasn't
true.
gone well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. Actually, I did give him a few days ago or a few weeks ago. Like I was like, hey, that was actually a really good line. Like, so yeah, absolutely. But I think these kinds of conversations on most shows are just like, they really are black and white, right? You either have people who are going, no, fuck them, they don't deserve it, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. That's the end of the conversation. Or you have people who are like, oh, they absolutely deserve it. And all of their reasonings, I feel, are really fucking stupid, right? Where they'll just be like, yeah, okay, yeah, he did it, but you know what I mean? Like they'll do things like that where it's like, no, there are no buts in this situation. You do have to accept that both these things are true. On the one hand, they are horrible. On the other hand, they are great. Unfortunately, those are both true, right? Which is why I lean towards the no, but I also understand the yes, and why seemingly are like, no, I think they should be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think that you can necessarily disagree with anything that I just said.
I don't. I think you make a good point about, I think they should be inducted on their merits, but I also don't think they should be celebrated, right? And so yeah, I think that's a good point about how do you handle their induction in a way that is respectful to, the grayness of their characters, right?
Mhm.
And what they did. And while understanding that Vince's impact on professional wrestling is immeasurable, but also that he did horrible, horrible things to people.
Yeah.
And Chris Benoit did the worst thing you can ever do to anybody, to his own family, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I said, Vince McMahon, immeasurable impact on the business. Chris Benoit, one of the greatest technical wrestlers to ever do it. I love watching Chris Benoit matches.
Yeah.
And I can do that even though I know what he did.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to, and I will never forgive him for what he did. Got emotional on the podcast.
Yeah, you cried on the podcast. Yeah, like you, like
I didn't cry, shut
up. No, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I think one of the reasons why I do understand really the yes, and I mentioned this when we did the Chris Benoit episode, right? There are people who are alive currently who were positively affected by Chris Benoit, who hold on to that. And I'm specifically talking about for sure his son who is living, and I'm fairly confident his daughter who is also alive. Do they deserve to be punished for that? Because they can't bring up his name without all of the negatives that come with it, right? And in the case of Vince McMahon, it is similar, right? Stephanie, she can't really bring him up anymore without it being an awkward conversation or, all this kind of nonsense. Is that fair to those individuals? Those are people who I think would heavily argue that those individuals should be in a Hall of Fame or respected or loved for their, we'll just say art. We'll just go with that blanket statement, art. That's a hard thing to debate against. And I think to just automatically say yes or no in one way is naive. I will say in the case of Chris Benoit, if you're going to induct Chris Benoit, at least a year prior, woman should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. If that's the case,
Fair.
because I think that clearly innocent in the situation, also very impactful in her own right, was a very good manager, did a lot of good in the world of wrestling before she chose to retire to be a mother. So I think you at least, what I would hate to ever happen is you decide that you're going to induct him and then we just kind of forget about woman. And then, it's like, where's her, where's the love for her? So I think at least you would have to do that. And then it would go back into the, how do you find a way to make it respectful and all that stuff? Because I think those are two really good cases. Another case, although he's already in, would be, Jimmy Superfly Snuka. He was in before we kind of found out that he was a murderer. So there's
He's in
definitely
this year. He's in 1996.
Yeah. So there are people where it's like, you can, going back to baseball, you can make the argument like their big thing is steroids, right? You don't deserve to be in because you took steroids, right? That's what's kept Barry Bonds and Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. Sammy Zayn's a wrestler. Sammy Sosa and Roger Clemens out of the Hall of Fame, right? And if you were just look at those four individuals' numbers, they clearly deserve the Hall of Fame. Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not Mark McGuire or Sammy Sosa deserve it, because there's definitely arguments against that I think you could make. I still think they do, to be clear. Roger Clemens, it becomes a lot more gray because he was so goddamn good. And in the case of Barry Bonds, it is unfathomable to me that he should not be in the Hall of Fame, especially when you look at the time he took steroids and the time he wasn't taking steroids, and how those players are relatively similar. And so there's a really good case. But my point is that you look at Jimmy Superfly Snuka, he's in the Hall of Fame. he did murder someone. The only reason he wasn't sent to jail and all that was because he was so old and so brittle and all that they just went, there's no point. He died shortly after. So
I'm reading it right now because I was like, wait, what? Because
Yeah.
you said might be a murder. I was like, I don't remember this, but I'm looking
Yeah.
at it right now. Like, yeah, that they deemed him unfit to stand trial because they didn't deem him mentally competent enough.
Yeah. So you have that, right? Well, in the case of baseball, you have Jeff Bagwell, who was on reports of having taken steroids and is in the Hall of Fame. There are other people as well who are in the Hall of Fame who are known to have taken steroids. But what we've done is we've taken individuals that we have decided are the ones who must fall on the sword. They are the sacrificial lambs, as it were, the scapegoats. And so we've created them. And in baseball, you have like the 4 names I just mentioned. There's a few others, but those are the big 4. And in wrestling, you have right now the big one, because no one's even brought this up with Vince McMahon. We're kind of the only ones I know that are talking about this. But you have Chris Benoit. He is that name. But you technically have a murderer already in there. I'm not saying that justifies it. I'm saying it makes it more complicated. And that's my point.
I hear you. I also have no idea where we are anymore.
We are on Mr. Perfect warming up. When
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, man. Mr. Perfect's warming up, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley sees him, and he beats his ass. He starts jamming like a
It's like a sound crate.
Yeah, like a sound crate into his knee over and over. And then, Mr. Perfect says some words.
Yeah.
Some words you can't say on TV.
Yeah.
You got anything to say about this?
I liked it. It's enjoyable. It got to be for me.
So yeah, we might not get to see that Mr. Perfect match after all that we were promised, Spoiler, we don't. After that, though, we get some Stone Cold talking some shit about Bret Hart, and then we get Bret Hart. He's been gone for months. I think I read that
6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. His last appearance was WrestleMania.
Yep.
He talks a lot. He talks a lot of shit about Sean. You want to take this one since he's talking about your boy?
So JR introduces him because this is kind of his thing. And he asks Bret if he's going to retire, if he's going to come back, make movies, work in the office. What's the future look like for Bret Hart? And Bret mentions he wasn't sure if he was going to come back to the WWF or go somewhere else. Side note, this is true. Allegedly, Bret was offered a 3-year deal for $9 million to join WCW. According to Bret, he told Eric Bischoff, "I want the exact same pay as Hulk Hogan plus 1 penny." Bischoff naturally said no, but pleaded with him to give him a number he could bring back to Ted Turner. Bret requested $3 million. The next day, Bischoff offered a contract for $2.5 million a year plus royalties. Vince called him very shortly after this and left a message saying, "Hey, I know you already signed, but please call me back." Hart called him back and said, "I would never sign without telling you, but they offered me $3 million and I have to think about it." Vince flew up to negotiate with Bret and then flew Bret down to Connecticut, and they offered him any kind of storyline that he wanted. Well, Bret apparently had devised at WrestleMania 12 with Shawn to not shake his hand after the match. And again, this is all from Bret's point of view, so that's just to be clear. To play up the idea that he was pissed about Gorilla Monsoon's decision to create and to help create a potential storyline down the road. This apparently worked so effectively that Owen called him the next day and said, "Hey, the boys think that you hate Shawn," which, according to Bret, he did not. Vince then offered him a 20-year deal worth $1.5 million a year. And Bret decided to stay, which, by the way, is a stupid move. You had $3 million on the table and you took 1.5. I don't care that it was for 20 years. Regardless. Now, Bret has offered some reasons why. Everybody that had left WCW and come to WF was like, that place is a shithole. So there's some merit there. I understand that. But, we're talking about a lot of money. He feels, being Bret, that once he leveraged the deal to get more money from Vince, he was screwed from that day on. So the Montreal screw job, yes, happened under the circumstances it happened. But he said even if that didn't happen, it was going to happen at some point. They were going to find a way to stick it to me. Going back to this promo, he mentions that he will be with WWF forever. And Vince goes, yeah. It's fucking weird.
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever's a long time.
Forever's a long time. 8 months.
Yep.
Hart then says that Sean beat him fair and square, but says that even though there's no excuses and Sean isn't his enemy, there's something about him that just bugs him. He says Sean may be a champ, but he'll never be as tough as Bret or as smart as Bret. Then he quotes Richard Nixon, which is either really dumb or really brilliant heel foreshadowing. He then says he will accept the challenge of the best wrestler in the WWF today. And let me be clear here, there is no transition from what he just said about Sean to this point. He says, I will accept the challenge of the best wrestler in WWF today, and I'll face Stone Cold at Survivor Series. This is a very subtle dig at Shawn Michaels. Bret continues, and he tells a story about a little boy with cancer who he swore if that boy could kick out, then Bret would come out of retirement and wrestle again in the WWF. And it looked like things were going good for the boy, but unfortunately, he passed away and it didn't work out. And that boy was his nephew. He says he wanted to give kids someone they could look up to, not someone who could dance or pose for girly magazines.
Ooh!
That pretty much ends this segment. I'm giving this a D. Not because he calls out Sean, because that's perfectly fine to do. I have no problem with that. But because this fucking promo is all over the place and, like many Bret Hart promos, stays on way too fucking long. I will say it hits every note, but none of them are a chord. They don't have any relation to each other. They're just jumping around, and that's kind of Bret Hart's problem. Sean obviously is a great speaker when he gets to speak from the heart, and we will see him speak from the heart very soon. Stone Cold is arguably the best at this. When you give him a mic and just say, hit these points and go out there, he will hit every single one of them, give you his flair on it, and be incredible. And we're going to see some great promos in the future. We've seen a few good ones, but we're going to see some great ones in the future. Bret Hart is incapable of doing this. Bret Hart needs to be, here's what you're saying, or if you want to write it, that's fine, but tell us what it is, and we're going to trim that shit way down, and then go out there and be matter of fact. Because when he gets to just go, and this segment is like 10, 15 minutes long, it fucking goes off the rails. And this is a perfect example of it.
Which is unfortunate, because I felt like there was a number of things in there that I thought were pretty good. I thought a lot of the stuff about Sean was good. I thought the dig was good, right, to create that rivalry. I liked the subtle, I'm going to wrestle the best, and it's Stone Cold Steve Austin. I liked that. I think that's good. Like, that's good heat, right? Creating this. He's got his match with Steve Austin, but Sean's got the title. Sean's the main target. And so I thought that stuff was good, but you're right. It just kind of went on and on and on, and he jumps from different thing to different thing to different thing, and little boys with cancer, and it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and look, I'm sure he said the cancer thing because I'm assuming it really was his nephew. I get it. That's a personal thing to you. I get it. Essentially, what his promo was trying to do was to say, Sean, you won fair and square, but I got a problem with you, and I'm not quite certain what it is. And what the next thing should have been was, no, I can't dance like you. No, I can't pose in girly magazines like you, but what I can do is give children someone to look up to. And that's why I'm going to wrestle the best wrestler in the WWF, who is not you, Sean. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that should have been the promo. Because those are all the beats that he makes. It's all the points he's trying to hit. He just does them in the wrong order and takes forever to get to them. And it's like, if you just condensed it to that would have been perfect. I'd be giving this an A.
Yeah, Bret is best when he's short and sweet. He's done a couple of good promos, and they're all consistently just very short. Like, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do to you. I'm done. I'm the hitman, right? I'm telling it like it is. I'm telling you how I'm going to wreck you. I'm the best. Done. It's easy. It's just easy. And then, but Bret gets high on his own supply, and that's the problem, right?
Yes.
After that, though, we got to lighten the mood, we got some karate fighters.
Nice.
We got Todd Pettingill, whatever his name is, Todd Pettingill and Jerry Lawler going at it with them karate fighters, and we love that. That's a beautiful thing. And that leads in, and most importantly, that leads into our main event. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it does.
There's no time.
It literally does.
Yeah.
So this was supposed to be the Mr. Perfect return, but it's not.
I don't know what you're saying, because Mr. Perfect comes out. He comes out right after Hunter hears Helmsley.
But he can do it.
I mean, he says he can.
I just don't think it's in his best interest, so he can't. I guess. So instead, it becomes a Mark Marrow Hunter Hearst Helmsley match for the IC title. Tell me how this all works out. Tell me about this.
Yeah, so JR interviews him, and because JR is like, I'm doing this job better than fucking everybody, so I'm gonna do it. So he goes to interview him, and Perfect's annoyed at Hunter for attacking him, but he's like, look, I have guts, and I'm still gonna fucking wrestle you. I'm fine, I can do that. And then Gorilla Monsoon steps in and says, I refuse to let you wrestle. That is not happening. I am not letting you be cleared. Doctor has said you can't. I'm saying you can't. It's done.
Good guy Gorilla, though, looking out for his athletes.
So then Perfect says, you know what? Marrow will wrestle in my place. And Hunter says, no. He goes, I have no obligation to wrestle Mark Marrow. I have no contract to wrestle Mark Marrow, so I won't. And then Perfect says, what? You don't have the guts? And Hunter says, look, I tell you what. If he puts the IC title on the line, then I will wrestle him. And Monsoon says only I can sanction that match. And as long as Mark Marrow agrees, then I will allow it. And Mark Marrow says, let's get it on, or something like that. And he says he'll do it. So Monsoon says, okay, let's have the match. So now the match becomes Mark Marrow and Hunter Hearst Helmsley, like you said, for the Intercontinental Championship. This is a decent match, but it does lead to a ref bump. At this point, Hunter grabs a chair while the ref is knocked out, and then clearly is intending to use it on Mark Marrow. He goes into the ring and he holds back the chair ready to swing, and before he can, Sable grabs the chair and she's holding it so that way he can't swing it. At this point, Perfect runs in, pulls the chair out of both their hands, and is ready to swing at Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and then turns, and Mark Marrow turns to him, and he swings it and hits Mark Marrow right in the head. Helmsley picks up a completely limp Mark Marrow, hits the pedigree for the win. With this, Hunter Hearst Helmsley is officially out of the doghouse after 5 months of the curtain call and all of its ramifications. Marrow is kind of now in it, as he had a very short-lived, title run. It was the highlight of his WWF career. He will never win another title with the company. And very soon, Vin Man will focus on Sable and specifically her body, and potentially do some illegal shit with that too. Perfect and Helmsley celebrate together in the ring, and it was all a con. I do think it's weird to immediately pull the title off Marrow only a month after he won it, but I do think Hunter is very deserving of the spot personally, though I would have preferred to build towards it, like Hunter injures Perfect, who is managing Marrow, and that sets up their feud that culminates in a match at, let's say, Survivor Series or Royal Rumble, and then you have the heel turn from Mr. Perfect. I think that would have worked better, it would have been more interesting, and it would have given more momentum to Hunter, as well as letting Marrow have an actual run of 3, 4, 5 months as opposed to 1. But that being said, I did give this a B. I did enjoy it.
My thought on this is, what? You're right. I thought the match was fine, and Hunter's apparently out of the doghouse. He got the title, but this was the plan. this was supposed to, apparently Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Mr. Perfect's devious plan. This whole time, stealing Hunter's women, all of that was leading up to tricking Mark Marrow into putting the IC title on the line, when it really had nothing to do with Mark Marrow the entire time. Your comment about training Mark Marrow or something, like Mr. Perfect's building heat with Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, but not doing anything on the Mark Marrow side, like not befriending him or anything. So why would Mark Marrow agree to do this? Well, he's like, yeah, I got you, man. They're not friends. I've never seen them hang out. They're not getting dinner after the show. I don't know. This was the plan. What about if Mark Marrow just said, nah, I'm good?
Yeah.
What kind of plan was this?
That's why I'm saying, like, if you had let it breathe for a little bit, then you could have established why, right? But we don't have a why
at all. You spend a minute on the plan, like this whole thing between Mr. Perfect and Triple H was to trick Mark Merrow into putting the IC title on the line. Why would they ever assume Mark Merrow would agree?
Yeah.
Like, of course he will. What does he did because that's what the story calls for. But to you and me, why? Why would he agree? I don't know. Like I said, the wrestling was good. We like Hunter Hearst Helmsley, obviously. We really like Mark Merrow. We think he's completely underrated. Really wish he had gotten more. WWF should have stayed with WCW in hindsight. But the story, what the hell? WCW won.
Yes, they did. I think so. We had mentioned last week that we were gonna see a rise in ratings. Raw does get a rise in ratings. The big build to it was that obviously Bret Hart was coming back, and you had Mr. Perfect wrestling for the first time. So these are two big momentous things. They do get a very healthy rise. They were 1.8 last week. They're 2.6 this week, but Nitro is crushing it, and they're 3.2. So they barely drop, even just barely, and they still destroy Raw.
And Nitro wasn't even really that good. It was Jobber of the Week for 90% of it.
But then you have the end of Nitro, right, which is momentous, which is going to make you want to tune in the following week. And the crazy thing about that is, like, think about this episode of Raw. This is essentially them pulling out all the stops. I mean, Bret Hart's coming back. Mr. Perfect's going to have his return match in however many years or whatever long it's been.
Mm-hmm.
This is them going, this is everything we got, everything we can throw at the wall. And it's like, it's not enough, homie.
No, it's not. Well, and then you watch it and it leaves you with a head scratcher. But like, why though?
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm done. I don't think I have more to say. It's just Raw is flatlining. And like I said, minus the very end of Nitro, I didn't think Nitro was all that good this week.
Yeah.
It's just Raw is so much worse by comparison.
Absolutely.
That does it for me, Joseph. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.